After Derrick Henry got injured in Week 8, the question wasn't if Tennessee's offense would be less productive, but to what extent. Running back is a difficult position to evaluate because its production is uniquely reliant on the performance of other players. For the most part, if you have a good offensive line, you'll have a good running game, and if you have a bad offensive line, you'll have a bad running game. But Derrick Henry is in the elite class of running backs that can overcome mediocre blocking and elevate good blocking, so I was really interested to see what the Titans' run game looked like without him. We've got 4 weeks of film on the post-Derrick Henry Titans offense, and in this video we're going to look at what's different, what's the same, and what to expect going forward. As always, we're going to start by looking at some statistics, and if we compare Tennessee's run game in weeks 1 through 8 to weeks 9 through 12, you can see that they've regressed in almost every category. Without Derrick Henry, Tennessee's yards per attempt is slightly lower, their yards after contact per attempt is way lower, broken and missed tackle percentage is about the same, and EPA per attempt is a lot worse. But my primary interest with this video is Tennessee's ability to move the ball on the ground, and EPA is significantly affected by fumbles. Obviously, you can't just ignore turnovers, but fumbles are usually pretty volatile over an extended period of time, and I'm not that focused on it for this video, so if we remove fumbles from every team, Tennessee's EPA per attempt moves up to 11th over the past 4 weeks. So just from a brief look at the numbers, without Derrick Henry, the Titans' running game has gone from elite to above average, and we're going to look at 3 potential reasons for this drop-off, starting with the offensive line. Over the last 4 weeks, Tennessee's offensive line has the highest blown block percentage and the worst run block win rate in the NFL. Titans running backs have actually been hit at or before the line of scrimmage less frequently, which kind of makes sense because as great as Derrick Henry is, he's not very elusive in the backfield, especially before he's built up speed. And then Tennessee's PFF run blocking grade is lower at every position on the offensive line. I'm not showing these splits to suggest that the Titans' run blocking has a bunch of major problems all of a sudden. It's just worth noting that we're evaluating a small sample size of 4 games, and within those 4 games, the run blocking has been worse than the 8 games prior. There's a certain level of bad run blocking that no running back can overcome no matter how great they are. It doesn't matter if you're handing it off to Derrick Henry, Jeremy McNichols, Adrian Peterson, whoever. If someone gets hit the second they take the handoff, or if they're completely surrounded by defenders right when they get the ball, the play's most likely going to end up as a loss. There's also a certain level of good run blocking that pretty much no NFL caliber running back can screw up. Just to give the O-line some credit, let's take a look at this play against Arizona. The Titans are running outside zone, and this is a rare example of all 5 offensive linemen resoundingly winning their blocks. David Quessenberry creates a ton of push on the play side, Nate Davis and Roger Saffold win at the second level, and Ben Jones and Kendall Lamb do a good job securing their reach blocks. With a gap this wide to run through, it's pretty much impossible not to get 15 plus yards. And here's another example against Jacksonville where the run blocking is pretty much responsible for the entire play. So there's a top and bottom 20% of run plays that are pretty much entirely dependent on the blocking, and that middle 60% of plays is where running backs really differentiate themselves. And that brings us to Derrick Henry, who, despite being the consensus best running back in the NFL, is still, in my opinion, underrated when it comes to skill level. Everyone will tell you that Henry is a unicorn athletically with his size and speed combo, but that's usually where the conversation stops. There isn't nearly enough recognition of the fact that Derrick Henry has better vision than any running back in the NFL, and that vision has contributed to a lot of his production over the years, and Tennessee's other running backs have not been able to consistently match it. To start, let's take a look at this wide zone play against Buffalo. So in wide zone, the running back's initial aiming point is the outside leg of the tackle, and he's reading the defensive front 1 to 2. If number 1 is cut off, meaning he's on the inside of the tackle, the back will bounce the run outside, and if number 1 establishes outside position, he'll move on to number 2 and make the same read to determine whether or not he needs to bend to the backside. So Henry takes the handoff, reads number 1 and sees that he's setting the edge. He reads number 2 and sees that Saffold is sealing off the inside shoulder, so with 1 and 2 both out, he cuts back for a massive gain. And you can see they're just going full flow to the front side, flushing the defense this way. The right tackle is going to drive the will out of the play, and then the most important thing from a blocking perspective here is the backside catch hand from Nate Davis to lock up the nose tackle. And then on top of his consistently quick processing ability, Henry significantly improved his lateral movement skills, and he can pull off really sharp cutbacks in these situations. Here's another one. This time they're going to come out in I formation. They send Pruitt in motion, and what they're doing is IDing the role of the safety. When Thornhill rolls down, Tannehill checks to weak zone because he knows they're going to have a numbers advantage to the weak side. So now it's just the exact same play as the last one, with the right tackle and the center driving out the backers, the right guard reaching the nose, and since this is weak zone, these tight ends are going to seal off the edge, and you're just splitting the defense in half. Henry reads 1 to 2, 1's out, 2's out, so he cuts it back, and again, great technique with the catch hand by Nate Davis. But like I said, there's been a noticeable drop-off from Henry to the backups when it comes to correctly reading the defense. If we check out this play from D'Onta Foreman against New England, the vision disparity is pretty clear. Tennessee's running wide zone with a lead blocker, which slightly alters the numbering system we discussed earlier. When the alley defender comes down to his fit, he becomes number 1, and then the D end becomes number 2, and then the back is just making the same read as before. So Jalen Mills comes down and sets the edge. Kyle Van Noy has outside positioning on Jeff Swaim, and the rest of the line is splitting the defensive front in half, so Foreman needs to cut this back and most likely reach the end zone. With Derrick Henry, this play results in a touchdown, and just to give one more example, let's look at a very similar play against Kansas City in 2019. Again, Tennessee's running wide zone lead, 1 and 2 are both out, and Henry makes the correct read to the backside. The poor vision from Tennessee's running backs isn't just about missing cutback lanes. Sometimes the correct read is off the play side tackle. Right here they're running stretch zone, which unlike wide zone isn't really prioritizing the cutback. You're trying to take it right off the tackle. So instead of a kick out block, the play side tackle and the tight end are going to reach block. And so the read should be that 1 and 2 are both in, so you bounce the run outside, but Foreman cuts it back into an unblocked defender. I also want to point out as a side note that teams have gotten back into having their backside edge defenders crashing on outside zone. For the first few weeks of the season, the Titans would try to run the fake zone play action boot that they like to call, and defenses were having the edge just attack the quarterback, but these rollouts have been pretty wide open recently, so keep an eye out for that. The relative decline in the run game isn't solely on the running backs. Teams around the league are doing a better job defending wide zone in particular. Right here, when Quan Alexander reads the play, he just undercuts Nate Davis because he knows that Tennessee wants him to just continue to flow play side and get flushed out of the cutback lane. I've only really discussed outside zone so far, and it's the main run concept that the Titans use. They've run outside zone on 40% of run plays this year, but the same issues are present with other run concepts as well. On gap runs, there's still way too many examples of backs avoiding open lanes and running into traffic. Right here, the Titans are running ISO, and with outside zone, the back is usually reading the leverage of the defensive front, but in gap runs, they're usually reading the linebackers. So when Donta Hightower steps play side and engages with the right guard, this backside A gap becomes wide open. Here, the Titans are running power with Saffold as the backside puller, and the design gap for this play is the front side B gap. But if the linebacker is playing this aggressive over the top, he needs to bend the run to the backside. This play, Tennessee's running duo, and again, it's about reading the linebackers. The running back's goal in duo is to let the linebacker choose his track first and then make him wrong. So on this play, Adrian Peterson should have bounced front side, and we can see an example of the correct duo read on this touchdown run from Derrick Henry. Here's D'Onta Foreman running duo, and this time the correct read is to bend. The linebackers collapse. The 3-tech is trying to 2-gap on the backside, so this cutback lane through the B gap is wide open. Plus, if you're going to run play side here, hit the gap that your offensive line's trying to open up instead of running into the defender's leverage. When I tweeted this clip, there were some people saying it was unrealistic to expect Foreman to see this hole. And I disagree. I think it's reasonable to expect running backs to read a defense. But like I said before, the point is not to just criticize a backup player. It's to contrast backup players with Derrick Henry. Because when we look at the exact same play with Henry at running back, the result is very different. Tennessee's running duo out of an unbalanced formation with 2 tight ends on one side. Henry takes the handoff, and Zach Cunningham's kind of slow playing it, so Henry gives a quick jab to get Cunningham to shift, and then he bends the run to the backside and takes it to the end zone. So I've shown a bunch of examples of bad vision from Tennessee's running backs and good vision from Derrick Henry in the same situations, but the conclusion is not that Tennessee needs Derrick Henry to have an effective run game. Despite all my criticism of Foreman, there have been a lot of plays that he's read correctly and turned into successful runs. Plus, Foreman has a really nice blend of power and speed, and assuming the fumble is a one-off rather than a recurring problem, I would like to have him on the roster even after Henry returns. There's just going to be missed opportunities for explosive plays without Henry in the lineup because his vision is so consistent and his athletic ability allows him to turn 15-yard first downs into 70-yard touchdowns. The player I haven't really mentioned in this video is Dontrell Hilliard, who I've been extremely impressed with. He's benefited from great run blocking on some of his biggest runs, but he has really good contact balance and he can shed arm tackles to pick up extra yards. He's also really decisive with his cuts, and in my opinion, he should be the Titans' lead back until Derrick Henry returns. Tennessee's 4th in rushing EPA with Derrick Henry and 11th without him, and that's about where I expect them to land going forward, somewhere in the 12 to 15 range. Like I said, the Titans' run game is going to have some missed opportunities and will probably be more dependent on blocking, but I don't think it's going to hold the offense back. The third and final thing I want to discuss is how defenses are treating Tennessee's offense differently without Henry in the lineup, and this is, in my opinion, the most significant effect of his injury. So in weeks 1 through 8, opposing defenses played the Titans with slightly heavier boxes on average than they have the last 4 weeks. If you look at this graph, you see there's been an increase in 5- and 6-man boxes and a decrease in 7- and 8-man boxes. This change could be significant, but my guess is that it's just the result of a small 4-game sample size because box counts are dependent on offensive personnel above anything else. Teams are going to fit the run no matter who's in your backfield. If you come out in heavy personnel, the defense is going to match it with base. And if we look at which running backs face the highest average box count, you can see Derrick Henry's at 7.17 and Tennessee's other running backs are at 7.06. But this list correlates a lot more strongly with which teams run the most 2 tight end sets than it does with how good the running back is. To me, the more telling number is what teams are doing with their safeties. In weeks 1 through 8, Tennessee's opposing defenses lined up with 2 deep safeties 32% of the time, but that number has increased by 10% in the last 4 weeks. So it's not that teams are taking their safety out of the run fit or anything. They're just more willing to play too high and have them fit the run from depth. And it's a lot harder to throw the ball against split safety than it is against single high, especially when it comes to the play action shot plays that the Titans like to run. If a safety bites on the play action, he's going to have a much easier time recovering depth if he was already lined up deep than if he was lined up in the box. This is far from the only issue the Titans have with their passing game, but it's definitely a contributor to their recent struggles. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Also check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel and get access to extra content.